One of the great writing tools used by all of the gospel writers is the power of contrast. These great stark images contrasting the differences between God's ways and man's ways, between Jesus' love and his teaching and his life and the life and teaching of the rest of the world. Think here of the image of like Pontius Pilate, right? Pontius Pilate is the ruler, and he's clothed in power, and he's wearing the garments of someone in power, and he's comfortable, and he's not necessarily in danger, and he is standing over Jesus and judging Jesus, and Jesus is in, this tattered clothing. He's all bloodied, he's all beaten up, maybe he's hunched over, he's got a crown that's meant to mock him. And one is supposed to be the image of power, and the other is supposed to be the image of being trapped, of being enslaved. And the reality is that Pontius Pilate was trapped, and Jesus was truly free, and Jesus was truly powerful, and Jesus was the real king in that particular exchange. Or you can think about one of the other great and famous moments of contrast, and that's between the rulers of the time that went to, or the religious elite of the time that went to stone Mary Magdalene. And they're standing, and they've got rocks in their hands, and it's a whole group of them, and they've come to condemn Mary Magdalene, and they've come to stone her, and they come to Jesus, who's on the ground with no weapons, with no one backing him, and they come to him, and with a single sentence, Jesus turns them all away. Right? They're supposed to be strong, powerful religious elite, standing, towering over the top of Jesus, trying to intimidate him, and Jesus on the ground, in stark contrast, in humility, is really the one who is loving and powerful and connected with God. Now, there are countless other really famous examples of the stark contrast between God's ways and man's ways. What I love so much about this week's gospel, and what is such a challenge, a beautiful challenge in this week's gospel, is that it's an ordinary contrast. It's an example of an ordinary contrast between the way that God thinks and the way that we think. So Jesus, he is walking with his disciples. He is traveling with them, and he has got a message for them, right? And he has something he really, really wants to tell them. And he is being as blunt and as clear as you could possibly be. He's like, I am going to suffer and die and rise again. And they don't hear any of it, not a single word, because they're too preoccupied thinking, who is the greatest among us? Who's the best? Of everybody here, who is the best? And this is such an ordinary, beautiful, powerful contrast, because God is focused on what is essential and what they really need to hear, and they're focused on something trivial, something inconsequential. And that happens in our lives, doesn't it? That happens in my life all the time. I want to have a certain type of conversation with God. I want to talk about certain things with God. I get distracted about worldly things. I get distracted about things that are of minimal consequence, or things that don't really matter. And I don't hear the conversation that Jesus wants to have with me. I don't hear him wanting to talk to me about the importance of spiritual progress. I don't hear him talking to me about like how well I'm loving my wife and my children, because I'm too preoccupied with finances, or I'm too preoccupied with advancing in some area, or I'm too preoccupied with some perceived offense of some other person, But Jesus wants to have a specific conversation with me. And Jesus wants to have a specific conversation with you. So what I invite you to this weekend as you go into Mass on Sunday is a degree of openness, a degree of receptivity. You know the things that are on your mind and your heart. Find a way to lay those down at the altar, and be open to what God wants to talk to you about. Be open to the conversation God wants to initiate with you, and see how it changes you. See how it alters your experience of the Mass this Sunday. So God bless you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a great week. And as always, remember, you can do hard things. You were made to do hard things, and you'll be a shadow of yourself, of who you could be, if you don't.